We have another test before the final.
You mean test 3, so the 19th.
Keep going, on the 19th. Alright, so semester's winding down quickly. And that final is about a week away. It's actually, it's less than a month away, I'm sorry, not a week. It's less than a month away. So as we keep kind of working forward now, we talked about on Friday, what's that rule when we think about force and concentric, eccentric?
They work the same muscle. Concentric and eccentric are the same.
As it relates to force, man.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that the other day. We talked about if we know that the quads is what does the pushing on the way up during the squat, the quads is what does the controlling on the way down. We're going through some different stuff within the knee and within the elbow that we did on Friday. We're going to do a few more of those here today. We're going to limit some of the motions that we talked about last time. Some of the things we do with the ankle, we're not going to spend a lot of time on, but there's one particular I want to make sure we know. So inversion, eversion, not so much of a big weight room type exercise. You don't go in the weight room and strap on a thing and start going like this. Now, if you hurt your ankle, you just ankle rehab, you might start doing some stuff. But what do you do? What motion do you do with the ankle that stinks in the weight room as far as helping with performance?
Calf raises.
Calf raises. Okay, what motion is that at the ankle?
Sagittal.
Sagittal is a plantar motion. What movement is it? I'm sorry.
Flexion.
What kind of flexion?
I mean,
Plantar or dorsal?
No, extension.
Plantar or dorsiflexion?
Plantar flexion.
Plantar flexion as we come up on our toe. All right, so think about the ankle. Think about plantar flexion. I'm also not going to do dorsiflexion. You don't really see too many times as an athletic event where you stop and you rock back on your heels. Doesn't happen very often. Now, when we talk about running here in a little bit, and we push off and we go ready to run, you do have to dorsiflex in order to plant your heel back down. But we won't think about that too much from a standpoint of performance-based stuff. It's just more of a muscle that pulls you up, beats you back down. That's not really what helps you to explode. So we'll get to that. The plantar flexion, though, as you push off when you're running or as you push off when you jump, that plantar flexion becomes very important. As I push off to jump, what muscle is doing that? What muscle performs plantar flexion on the way up? Stay with the chip. The calf. So your calf is what's performing this motion concentrically, like we talked about the other day. And remember we updated concentric, and not updated, we talked about those the other day. You know what those are now. Excuse me. So if we know that the calf does concentric, we know our rule here. What does the eccentric portion of that motion?
Calf.
The calf itself brings it back down. So calf, now in this situation, will perform eccentric, which is going to be the dorsiflexion. On the way back down. This is the plantar flexion right there. That's going to be very important for us to make sure we understand that as we start talking about jumping and running next week. This whole week we kind of keep focused on these things. When we start talking about some stuff next week with running, we push off, we plantar flex, we have the dorsiflex in the air, we land again. It's going to be a constant back and forth motion, but the calf plays a big role, and I think we can understand that as far as being explosive. I mean, it'll run fast. Calves are very important. We know that, right? That's all we're going to do from the ankle. So don't worry about anything else from the ankle as far as the motions go that you guys did on the practical. Just because, like we said, they're not very relevant in the whole world of athletics. They play a role, but not very relevant. All right, what's the ankle's buddy in the upper body? Wrist. Okay, so we're not going to I'm not going to do anything on the board either. We can just talk about it real fast out loud, but you might go in the DJR, grab some dumbbells and do some forearm flexion exercise. You want to start to look like Popeye and get your arms bigger. Like baseball guys are notorious for that, even though this motion is never anything that really baseball guys do, which is so funny. But they still want their forearms to look big, but that's not something we're going to talk about. And we're also going to do a lot of this motion in the weight room. I can grab dumbbells. This is what baseball guys should be doing more of. That's really what's important for them. That's a different thing. We won't spend any time on the wrist This shit doesn't really play too much role in what we do from a standpoint of athletes. So now, let's get to kind of the big daddies of them all. We're gonna do one of them today, we're gonna do one of them on Wednesday. So what's the hips buddy in the upper body?
Shoulder.
Shoulder, right? So they're kind of connected. We said the other day, we talk about motions that are very important for us. Some of these we're not gonna talk about. Introduction rotation, we're gonna kind of stay away from. But there is some very big important ones from hips that plays a big role in what happens when we jump and we run. Flexion and extension, very important. All remember your practical days. What is hip flexion? I just take this part of my hip and raise it up, right? Hip flexion. What is hip extension? Doing the exact opposite, right? What does it look like when I run? Raise that thing up, push that thing back, right? Running plays a big role now. What about when I jump? I flex at the hip, and when I go off the ground, what do? I extend back up off of the hip, okay? So hip flexion, hip extension is very important from the standpoint of being explosive. When we think about the concentric nature of this motion, we think about doing a vertical jump for right now, we'll talk about. When I go down, what's happening at the hip? We just said it. When I go down, what's happening at the hip? Hip what? Hip flexion is happening on the way down. Is that the concentric or the eccentric part of a vertical jump?
It's the eccentric.
That's the eccentric. What's the concentric motion? Coming back up, what's the hip doing? Hip extension. If we remember our muscles right, what muscle does hip extension?
Quad.
Flexus and the butt.
Butt, very good, right? So your buttocks is what's going to allow you to, it's going to kind of grab on your hip bone this way and pull you back into extension. So the concentric nature of extension is your butt. I kind of wrote these upside down. I should have put them the other way around, my fault. But we think about concentric nature, so we're thinking about a vertical jump right here. When we get ready to leave the ground, our hip is extending and it's our butt that's kind of grabbing on and pulling us back up. Hamstrings play a small role in that, but not very much. There is one muscle that kind of works inside there. But the butt is primarily what does that. So, remembering our rule, on the way down on a vertical jump, what's loading everything up? What muscle is getting loaded up? Still your butt. That's what I like to think about when we think about vertical jump. We're thinking about sprinting here too next week. We talked about that before with this whole idea of eccentric, concentric, but when we go down, our butt is what's getting loaded up as far as loading up the spring. What other muscle is loading up? For the knee standpoint is our quads. So our butt and our quads are getting loaded up. We get ready to jump, they both release, and that's what allows us to get off the ground. All right, so hip flexion, hip extension, very important from that standpoint. When will we think about, from a standpoint of hip extension being concentric in nature? Now here it's eccentric, right? Flexion. But hip flexion would be concentric in nature. Is there any motion that we think of when that happens? Or this is the concentric aspect.
Any other motion?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes, so hip flexion is eccentric in the nature of leaving the ground, right? From an athletic standpoint, when is hip flexion the concentric nature of what happens?
I guess when you stand up, normal.
Standing up is still going up this way like you're trying to squat. So I'm going from here, the flexion has to be this way.
Like a leg curl?
Not so much, if I'm doing leg curls, basically at my knee, I'm not really doing anything right here.
Yeah.
So what about when I'm right here from running? What do I have to do when I'm running? What does my right leg have to do now? Push off, and then what does it have to do? Come up, raise itself back up, and then all the kick back down comes down this way, and then once I'm here, what happens to it again? Push off again and pulls it way back up. So when we are sprinting, is that making sense for now?
Yes.
Make a weird face, okay, make a weird face. When we are sprinting, the push leg, and that's something we haven't talked about before. I want you guys to get that down. I'll order a second. Running, sprinting. There's going to be two different things, and we'll talk more about these next week. Let's go ahead and give me a note somewhere now. We'll come back to them. When we are running and sprinting, there's always going to be a push leg and an off leg. The off leg, obviously, opposite of the push leg, If my right leg is a push leg, my off leg would be the left leg. As I push through here, what's my left leg doing is kind of just stabilizing, hanging everything on until this one gets back down, and this one becomes a push leg, and they keep going back and forth as we run. So if I was to start here and run out the door here, push leg, lead leg, push leg, lead leg, it would just keep going up. Every time I land, the other one becomes a push leg now. Now this one becomes a push leg. I see how I'm doing it? Push leg. Once you land, your lead leg becomes a push leg. And we keep sprinting down the road. Again, different muscles doing different things, but for now, all we're really talking about is the hip. Once that push leg goes this way, now that hip flexion is reversed. All right, is everybody staying with me? All right, like we said on Friday, if I had done this before the practical, it would have been even way worse, right? Push leg, the flexion now becomes concentric because I am trying to raise that thing up as fast as I can. So think about it in nature now. If I'm back here, I got to raise it up as I continue to run. That becomes concentric in nature, right? Right? What muscle is doing that? Not your butt now, because your butt was back here, and that's what pulls you this way. What's the ones that sit right here?
Hip flexors.
Hip flexion. That's all right. That's why we did the stuff before. Don't overthink that one too much, right? Hip flexors. But the hip flexors is what brings you up this way and allows that to occur. So we're here. We explode up as we run. We have hip flexion initiating, and that's where we're going to be at. Now this is where it gets goofy and running becomes an issue for us, but we're going to stay with us right now. Hang on to us a second. From this standpoint, once I'm up here, I have to extend to get back down, correct? What's going to do that for us? We know a rule. I just erased the rule. What's the rule? What's going to eccentrically lower us back down? It's the same thing.
About right.
Okay. So eccentric now becomes this. Let me spell eccentric right. That's part of ECC. You guys okay with that? Hip flexors again. So sprinting, the push legs are really the only leg we focused on because the other leg, just like I said, becomes a push leg anyway. We're not gonna spend too much time on it. But the push leg, we flex up the hip flexors, we slow ourselves down the hip flexors in order to get the heel back down, and then we go through the whole motion again as we continue to run down the track or the court or whatever we're doing from a running standpoint. So are hip flexors important for sprinting? Do you see track guys doing a lot of that kind of stuff with their hip flexors all the time? But you always kind of like put up things like that, whatever they're doing. I don't know what they are. I've never ran track. But I see them doing it all the time at the fence, and they keep raising their leg up really fast and try to spin it over hurdles and stuff. All that is happening at the hip because they're trying to make this muscle more explosive to get over the hurdles or run fast down the track, whatever they're trying to do, right? See how that's important. Good. What else can happen at the hip? Give me some other motions that you learned from your practical.
AD?
What's that?
Adduction.
So abduction and adduction. Kind of happens in sports. We're not going to cover it right now, simply because, yeah, if you cut and you change the directions, we're not going to focus too much on it. But think about it in your brain. I'm not going to write up here, so don't have to worry about it from a test standpoint. But if I'm going to push off to my right on my left leg, what is my hip doing as I go this way? What motion? Abduction as it goes out. So as I go this way, I'm trying to cut that way, my hip does abduction going out. What muscle is doing that? You remember that's that TF, that tensor fasciae latae one, right? So as we push this way, that's what's going to enable our leg to do this. Now, once I cut, what's it got to do?
Come back.
It's got to come back in, and that's where it gets a little bit weird with abduction, adduction. We're not going to do it in the class because you'll go slash my tires. Tensor fasciae latae here, and then once I got to be able to start going this way again, it's got to come back in, and my groin does the adduction part, and then I start running back straight whichever way I'm trying to go. There's not a true concentric nature, or eccentric, concentric here, concentric the other way, so I can start going straight again. But I'm not worried about that for up here. That's just kind of talking out loud. Right. What else happens at the hip? From your practical. So we did flexion, we did extension, we did abduction, we did adduction.
Rotation.
External rotation, not going to focus on that too much at all. That's more of an injury-based thing, so we're going to stay away from that one here. The horizontals, so if I get up in here, and I go out, what's that? Horizontal abduction, horizontal adduction. Is that important from a running standpoint? It can be, and it will be, especially we mentioned hurdles already in track. When they go over the thing, what does this leg have to do? It's you gotta kind of kick yourself
Clear.
around, swing yourself over that hurdle, right? So horizontal, abduction and adduction is the other one we're gonna cover from the hip standpoint. I'm gonna kind of condense this so you guys have the top one. And then we're talking about sprinting with the push leg. Right leg's what's gonna come over that hurdle. I guess the left leg's already cleared, that's okay. Remember the right leg come over it. It's gotta flex up and kind of get itself going around out this way. In order to this horizontal abduction, what muscle did that if we remember our practical days? This one we already said, what happens here?
Flexors.
Hip flexors, what to get us here. Then what's gonna allow us to actually abduction out this way?
Glutes pulls it.
The glutes is what's gonna pull it this way. Hip flexors raise it up. The glute pulls it out in order for us to come horizontal abduction as it brings itself out, right? Hip flexors. Oh, that's not right. There's gonna be a B, that was really bad B. And your butt. Or your ass. Did you say, wasn't it in this class we said your ass?
Right.
I was saying, wasn't it your ass? So horizontal adduction, coming back down with that lead leg, what's gonna happen? What's gonna control it? On the eccentric part, same muscles. This one's gonna slow it down, this one's gonna slow it down with your butt to bring it back down in order to get it on the ground and get ready to go again. So I'm just gonna do these things again. This was concentric. And this one was eccentric. All right, now, while you're writing those down, spin over here. Why are we doing all these crazy things? Because as we start thinking about your test 3, which is on the 19th, what is occurring at the ankle and hip and knee? Left one out. That says jump, really bad. That's kind of an example type question you're gonna see on test number 3. In fact, it looks almost exactly like that, except I might have a different kind of exercise going on here, but we just talked about the vertical jump. So that's gonna be kind of the question that's spin around up here, so we can kind of answer that out loud. What is happening? Well, I'll have muscles in there too. You guys love that. Yeah, now you guys are gonna slash my tires. I drove the gold BMW. Stop now. All right, so what is happening? Let's just kind of break it down from one stop. We'll start at the ankle. What is happening at the ankle during a vertical jump? The whole vertical jump. As I lower down, what is my ankle doing?
Right, look.
What motion? What movement?
Flex.
Which flexion?
It's
Dorsiflexion. So think about what's going on there. As I come down, now I'm not necessarily rocking back on my heels, but as I come down, my toes are technically going towards my shins because that's how I'm going to lower myself down. You understand that in our brain? I'm not doing this motion right now. We can see what's going on, what's happening there at the actual ankle joint itself. So let's just do going down first. Or let's do the eccentric part. So dorsiflexion is occurring at the ankle. We all agree with that, right? What muscle is doing that? What muscle is being loaded? That's where it gets stupid and crazy, and that's why I don't want you to slash my tires. But connect the dots here now. What muscle is going to be working on the way up?
the calf.
The calf. Remember our rule. So what muscle is getting loaded right now? Your calf. So the tib and, if I ride back on my heels, the tib and is what's going to pull my toes up. When my toes are coming up and I'm just getting ready to load that thing up, my calves are actually what's doing that concentric contraction on the way down. My tib and's not doing anything. It's just chilling because my calf is getting loaded up. Remember that concept? Right, we talked about loading the spring on the way down. So my calf's getting loaded up on the way up, and once I release and go up, what motion my ankle doing?
Plantar.
Plantar flexion coming off the ground, and what muscle is being released? The calf, because we loaded up on the way down, we released it on the way back up. Okay, so on the way down, dorsiflexion and calf will be the eccentric answer for the ankle part. What's happening at the knee? On the way down.
Knee flexion.
Knee flexion. What muscle? Think about it.
Quad.
Quad, very good. That opposite. Once we get ready to release and explode off the ground, our quad's what's going to extend us. But on the way down, the quad is being loaded. Are we following it now a little bit? Good. Back here, because make sure we have all these connected. Good, good. All right. What's happening with another? What's happening at the hip on the way down?
Flexion.
Flexion. But what's getting released? What's getting loaded?
The hip.
Well, the hip is, well, what muscle's loading up the hip?
The butt.
The butt, on the way back down. On the way down, sorry, on the way back down. So all those would be the answer to that first part of that, so we've done the down part. Now again, we'll keep kind of going over these, so you're looking at me like now, like, damn, you kidding me? We'll keep going over these, so we're not going to make it too confusing, but we still have to have some thought processes about your practical to remember what's happening at these joints.
We're having another practical?
No.
Oh,
But your practical stuff's got to be in your head a little bit in order to answer these kind of questions when you see these on your test
okay.
on the 19th. I think there's 5 of these
Will
total.
that be our last test?
We have a final 2.
Okay.
Yep.
Jesus. Sorry.
The final, I told the guys over here on Friday. What's good about the final? Well, what's bad about the final? It's what?
Cumulative.
It's cumulative. But what's good about the final?
It's optional.
Oh, you're gonna give us all the questions?
That's the good part about it.
Wait, what do you say?
I'm
He's
going to
gonna give
give
us all.
you all the questions. So it's not going to be like your other test where we do the review and I say it might be this or it might be that. When you come in on the 20th, which is your review, right? On the 20th, which is the day after your test, we're going to have a review for your final. I'm going to give you all 20 questions. Straight up. Say exactly what they are. You've got 5 days from that day until the 25th to go and study those 20 questions.
I'm getting enough.
And then come on in for your final and take it. So if you don't know the answers to your questions on the final, it's not my fault. Whose fault is it?
It's yours.
No, it's not my fault.
Alright.
There you go.
You
So
said
we'll
how
keep
many-
doing these.
How many questions?
20 questions.
20 questions.
I bet
But let's not worry too much about the final because you got another test coming up that I'm not going to give you all the answers to.
How many labs do we have?
How many labs we have? We have 1 left,
Okay.
which is going to be this Friday is when I'm going to hand it out.
Okay.
All right, so we just did we just did the knee and we did the hip, right? We did all that stuff. We're going down. All right, so we're going up. This is the simpler part because if you can figure out the going down for all these ones we're going to practice and go over, it's just flip-flop and have the muscles change. If you know the muscle going down, has muscle change going up?
Nope.
It has not. All you have to remember is the motions that go along with what the opposite of whatever you just did for the going down. So going up, the ankle, or going down, the ankle was doing dorsiflexion. We all agreed, right? What's the ankle doing going up? Plantar flexion. Does the muscle change? Nope. We say calf again. For the knee, it was flexion on the way down. What is it going up? Extension. What muscle was it? Does that change? Nope. All right, don't be confused. And then we said the hip was flexion. What did it? What loaded up?
Your ass.
It's extension.
Oh, extension. Thank you very much. And what muscle was it?
Your ass.
Yeah. Your ass. Well, that's your shoe right there. Something wrong. Let's talk to Brown Walk. I have ass on it. Right, so it's your butt again. So we keep practicing these. We're gonna do some of them. We're gonna do like bench press. We're gonna do that one next week. We're gonna do we'll throwing. We'll do on Thursday. It's gonna be a little bit more complicated one. But when we do throwing, as long as we do the muscles that kind of get loaded up, nothing changes when we actually go to throw a baseball or throw a football. We know what happens when they get loaded up. We know what happens when they throw and we actually release the baseball and things are actually being accelerated through the zone or whatever you think about when you're throwing something. As long as we know the muscles, when we accelerate, we know them, or when they get loaded up, we know what they are when they accelerate. What muscle gets loaded up when you bench press? Your chest, because it's getting ready to push it off your bar, off your chest in order to actually do the bench press. So the chest is what gets loaded up from that standpoint, right? Remember, the muscle that gets loaded is the one that actually. What did you say the other day? 'Cause that actually was a good way of saying it. Do you remember? I didn't write it down. Should have wrote it down.
It's controlling the weight and showing your strength.
Showing your strength is a way to think about it. Whatever muscle shows the strength is the one that gets loaded up.
Yeah, that's what you
and vice versa. Whatever muscle gets loaded up is the one that shows the strength. Keep those in your brain.
Negative motion.
Positive and negative motion. Okay.
Positive, shows your strength, negative controls.
So just for the sake of, since we just kind of talked about it, you guys did it on Friday, we're gonna do it one more time for this, because some of you guys weren't here. Make sure we remember the difference between these. So you guys are here on Friday, trying to answer right now. So you other ones that weren't here Friday, what's the difference between those two contractions? What's a concentric? There's three things you gotta remember from this standpoint. Concentric contraction is what? With or without gravity? Or with or against gravity, I'm sorry. Well, I'm doing the concentric nature of it, so.
With gravity.
So if this was a barbell, I'm in DJR, I'm gonna do a barbell curl. I go this way, is that concentric or eccentric? That's concentric. So on the way up, she's happy with herself. You're happy with yourself, you got it right. Concentric on the way up. So if I actually am going against gravity, I'm doing a concentric on the way up. So this is against gravity. I may not did it in this order on Friday, but the order doesn't matter. Muscle shortening. Well, we said on Friday, this is where you get swole. When the muscle gets bigger, you're doing the concentric nature of whatever it is. So when we're going up on the way up and we're leaving the ground, we're jumping off the ground, our quads are actually getting bigger in size because they are shortening in nature. They're getting closer together here, making the muscle look bigger. When I'm doing my curls in DJR, on the way up, at the very top is when the bicep looks the biggest because it's all kind of scrunched together. It's gotten swole. And we said positive rep is the other part of the three things we need to know from concentric. And then what Zeb said is actually, because I never heard it that way, whenever you're showing your force is concentric. If I go into DJR and grab the bar and I show how strong I am, it's when I lift it up, not when I lower it on the way down. Right? If I'm squatting, it's not when I lower it down, if I'm going to show how strong I am, it's when I push it back up. If I'm lunging, it's not when I lower down, it's when I'm pushing back up in order to show my strength. Right? So those are the three for concentric. So we know one of them, we know the other one, just flip-flop it. If this is against gravity, this is with gravity. If it's muscle shortening, what does it have to be? Muscle lengthening, getting longer. And then negative rep. I think I said something else for this one too the other day. Did you guys write that one down? For eccentric. I always remember getting swole for the concentric one. The muscle lengthening is when the muscle doesn't look as big. So on the way down from doing my biceps, it's not as big anymore. When I get down to the very bottom, that's when you're doing the eccentric part. Right? Very important, as you guys are seeing now, as we're talking about these motions, that you understand those two and get the differences. Because if you don't, you can get this whole question wrong if you don't know the difference between eccentric and concentric, and everything gets kind of confused and lost. So you got to know the difference between what's happening here to be able to answer these questions and get the muscles right and get the motions right. All right, questions? We did knee, elbow. We did ankle today. And we did hip. So you didn't get the knee and the elbow. Make sure you guys grab that on Friday. We went over the same kind of stuff for that. We're also going to do the trunk, the shoulder. I think that's where I left off. That's all we have left is the trunk and the shoulder. So we're going to do the shoulder on Wednesday. We're going to do the trunk on Thursday. And then Friday, we're going to do the whole big body motion of actually throwing a football or a baseball. And we'll connect all the dots. That's kind of what we're focusing on right now. All right? Very good?
Yep.
No questions, and you're free to roll.
Are you gonna put the thing on the canvas,
What am I doing?
like the project, like the?
Oh, yeah, the rubric, yeah, oh, I will. Is that what we're talking about? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like, you know, the rubric, like layout, what I'm supposed to do?
Yes, yes.
Did you go in for that lab 3 to fix it? Online? Did you for it?
I will right now. As soon as I leave here, I'm going right back to my office.
Alright,
All right, my fault.
Senior
One time,
seminar,
one time. All right.
senior
See the
seminar,
You have an email link shortly.
we what?
You have an email, it was a Zoom, 2:30 Zoom.
Okay, but I was looking at everything, I didn't see any assignment.
There's no assignment today.
Okay, good.
We're gonna do the review question, or the interview questions though, so You have basketball then?
Nope,
No, okay.
they're doing a football mini camp
Okay.
last week and this week, so we only get them one day.
Okay.
If they play. Dodgers got back in the driver's seat.
They did, didn't they?
Sure.
It's nerve-wracking.
They do all that pitching changing.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different game.
They only have 2 starting pitchers really on their staff.
I know. Well,
Wheeler
it's
and
gonna be
Kershaw.
another bullpen game.
Yeah, that's what they're gonna do tomorrow.
I guess you got a bullpen game and then you got Bueller
So,
for
guys,
game
they have
seven.
to, yeah.
You need it.
And they'll go Snell tomorrow and see if they can get in at least. get in.
Hell really goes longer than 4.5 to 5.
Yeah, 'cause they got all their guys too.
Nasty though.
Yeah.
I think May could be really
Bueller's
good.
pretty nasty too.
Yeah, he is. May just has that funky pitch.
Yeah.
Like rises on you.
He's his damn haircut.
That's what my buddy said. I said, you think it's a psychological thing? He's like, messes with their head.
Oh, that was
That wouldn't be.